There you go. So welcome everybody. Today is our meeting for September for the Employment Council for the Amputee Coalition's Workforce Development Program. Myself and Chris will be doing most of the program, but we have our fearless Leah Trinea on the call, of course. But so just to kind of give everybody a feel of who we are, the council's been together for quite a bit. And we know what we do in our respective roles, whether you're a volunteer like myself, or you're an employee, part of the employer council member. But I'm going to go around, and if you could give 2 words that best describe your personality. So it has nothing to do with your work or what you know, or anything of that nature. 2 words that best describe your personality. I'll go first to make everybody a little bit comfortable. And my 2 words are extrovert and disabled, because those are 2 words that have been used about me. So, Chris, 2 words that would best describe you.
Well, I can tell you one of them is probably going to be introvert. So we're complementary in that way. I don't know what the other one would be. Inquisitive, like I just love learning, asking questions, figuring out new things, just figuring out the world around me.
All right,
That's 2 words.
Lisa, 2 words that best describe you.
Oh, I would say determined and outspoken.
All right. Maurice, 2 words that best describe you.
I would say, to echo what Chris said, I'm a little introverted, and I would say methodical. Definitely would think and measure 100 times before we cut once.
Okay, Anne?
I would say loyal. And helpful.
Okay. And when you speak, Anne, we're going to ask you either to speak up or come closer to your mic, because you are
okay.
very, very
better?
excited.
Is this better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Maybe my word was quiet then.
There you go. Quiet and you don't want to know. Lauren, 2 words. Lauren? All right, we'll go over to you, Maria. 2 words that best describe you.
Stubborn and introverted.
Okay. Last call. Lauren, are you with us? I don't see her on mute, so we'll give her a moment and she can always jump back in with her 2 words. Oh, Trinea, 2 words. You didn't think you'd get out of it, did you?
I would say hardworking and a team player, Paula. Those are my.
Okay. All right. So we're going to jump into the agenda now, and the primary topic, so to speak, or the bulk of the topic for this this month is recruitment strategies. So what are I guess I could put it up this way. What are some of your primary strategies? And I know Trinea sent out a quick email asking you to send in some information. If you hadn't, that's fine. We can always go over it now. So what are your primary areas of trying to strategize how to increase, well, first of all, to attract the candidate, and then how to increase your hire percentage of individuals with disabilities? And then what are your hiccups? So are you getting the candidate pool that you want? If you're not, let's maybe strategize over what we can do to help you. Hello, Mr. Solomon. You very quickly have to do 2 words that describe you. That was the icebreaker for today, and you cannot use your work as, you know. Wow.
Scholar. Gentleman.
Okay, all right. So, first of all, does anybody want to go forward right away with what strategies are you, your company, organization using to attract the talent pool of individuals with disabilities? I'll open it up to whomever wants to jump on in.
We've been working with state agencies some to especially in the field. But we had a recent program for seasonal hires to work remotely. It was a sort of a customer service role that could be done remotely. So, and we focused on hiring people with disabilities for those.
What agencies did you go to where you found the highest
Yeah.
success rate?
See, it's
Or did you only go into state? Like
Yeah,
focus-
well, yeah, we did like there's an overall association of states, and then like each state has their own. So we worked both with the overall federal agency and then like some of the state specific ones.
Okay, all right. And do you think you had a high success rate? Did you get enough candidates to put in the pool? Were
Oh,
you
yeah.
able to get enough hiring?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. In it was our recruiting department along with third party recruiters that we use, and the third party recruiters got an award for it. Like it was that the closing rate with the candidates was like, I want to say like 90%. So of all of the people that were hired or that were interviewed, maybe 3 weren't hired, and that had more to do with their interest versus our interest. So
That is excellent.
yeah.
Love to hear it. Who else? Where are you going? How are you developing your candidate pool? Even if you're not the hiring manager or the individual that goes out to recruit, can you address what your company organization is doing to get that candidate pool to the mix? And anybody kind of ideas where you're getting that pool from?
Well,
I
ours is
know
a
we've
little,
got, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, please.
I was just gonna say
He's a
ours.
gentleman.
That's right. I did remember that. I was just gonna say ours is a little different because we're looking for clients to get out there to get employed. So I know that we post ads. I know, we may possibly get lists from Social Security. We reach out and do cold calls to see if they're interested in the Ticket to Work program. I think we're going to get into a little bit more marketing. Not sure exactly what those ideas are that they have in place yet, but ours is just a little different.
True, but you still have to get those candidates.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, if people come to you and say, I want to hire somebody,
Right. We don't have, yeah, right. If we don't have
if you don't have the
candidates, we don't-
candidate
right.
pool, then they're not going to keep coming to you and saying, that's a good place to get, a quality candidate from.
Yeah, and if anyone has any ideas on where we can market, that would be gratefully appreciated.
We'll probably touch on that. Solomon, you were going to say something.
Yeah, this is very much not my area. So it's probably the same as always. I know they've got a new round of neurodiverse hiring events coming up. I think there's still a consortium of companies that are that we're part of, that we helped build, that there's a central site for disability friendly jobs at a number of these companies. I cannot remember off the top of my head who all is in it, but I think it's at least 24. Beyond that, I'd have to, that's a different team. I make stuff. I don't recruit the people.
True. But, you know, Scuttle gets around.
It's true.
And people
There's
come,
Scotland over
hey,
there.
do you know anybody who has nobody, da, 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 da.
Yeah, we do have, I will say this, we're posting more accessibility focused roles.
Good.
And Microsoft as a whole has become a lot more friendly to remote work.
Mhm.
So there's more flexibility than there used to be. It varies by group, but hardware, we don't have a lot of remote because hardware. But there are a lot of other teams that work on a distributed model now. So,
Okay.
but yeah, the neurodiverse hiring program still remains, I think, the primary path for people to get in. But it does, as of right now, I think it's still very programmer heavy. But
Right.
they're looking at ways to potentially open that up to other disciplines. That's
I'm
the
gonna hold that
last I
thought
know of
for-
it.
for
Yeah.
One moment. Anybody else? Lisa, Lauren, Maurice? Where are you getting your candidate pool from? Or if you're not the person that goes out and finds the candidates, and someone came to your desk remotely or physically, and they said, hey, we want to hire whatever it may be, where would you guide them?
So I would just say, you know, as Anne had mentioned before, we don't do a lot of internal hiring with employment options, except for maybe literally like 1 or 2 spots a year, depend average, you know. But
Right.
we do, I do a lot of outreach, you know, for example, I was in person at the Amputee Coalition annual conference, you know, and met tons of people, met tons of agencies, and you know, we're able to get to know one another. I have had meetings with Hanger. I have had meetings with all sorts of, forgive me, Department of State. They were at your conference. I have like multiple meetings set up the next week or two. And you know, just connecting. We also do, you know, because we are an employment network with Social Security, we also do a lot of, they have a new program, it's called the texting marketing program. So they will give us lists of beneficiaries in specific areas so that we can provide outreach to market Ticket to Work. You know, so that it is baffling, really, because there are, I mean, what, probably millions of people on Social Security one way or another. And so many people have no idea that there is a Ticket to Work program out there that
Right.
people can take advantage of.
Right.
And, you know, it's just, and the crazy thing is Social Security will not let us, you know, put pamphlets in local offices. And I don't know why. It's kind of crazy. So we try to outreach as much as we can by, you know, getting beneficiaries aware of Ticket to Work program and how it's beneficial and why, you know, it can change your life and how it can change your life. So, you know, just coming up with different ideas, like Anne had said, like marketing, you know, we're always up for different ideas. You know, I like to get creative. I like to visit with people. I get out there and, you know, tell people my personal story of being on ticket and how it helped me. And yeah, I'm doing I was supposed to go to DC Thursday, but that I'm doing a virtual DC thing for the AADA on Capitol Hill, to promote Ticket to Work and, hopefully try to change a couple of rules that they have and,
Yeah.
all that.
Such as not advertising.
Yeah, it makes zero sense. I still to this day, I've been in employment options 14 years and I still don't understand why they won't allow us to drop literature off at like their, little counters where they have all the different brochures and resources, but
Right.
whatever. Anyway, so yeah, we get clients by outreach and partnering with different agencies, employers, and like I said, and we're always looking for different ways of meeting people or whatnot. So feel free to chime in.
So there's two things I want to bring up next, and we did get feedback from one of our employers. It's a gentleman thing, he goes by EQ. And he's from the Next Level Foundation. He's not on, but that doesn't mean we can't discuss his comments that he made. But before we jump directly into that, because Solomon, you brought up a very good point where you said that Microsoft at least is holding a lot of either career outreach in some way in the neurodivergent community. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. So let me put that up right now. But it seems to me, especially when I was, working in the recruitment field for individuals with disabilities, the spin cycle or the work cycle tends to have the disability flavor of the whatever time period. So I would get, we want to hire people that are deaf, or we want to, now neurodivergent. And I think it's wonderful, but then are you negating or pushing aside, maybe not in verbiage, so you can't say, sorry, you don't fit the X, okay. But are we then negating everybody else? And so then we're setting up a cyclical situation where, what is the flavor of the month? Or am I going to constantly get knocked down because I'm not the flavor of the month? And so I'm not getting hired because it's not the hot disability category. And then, so the way I perceive it is you're building up discrimination in an already discriminated entity. So that's the first thing to sort of get your mind spinning around. And then the question that EQ brought up, or the deepest concern that he had, they are a small organization. I think they're in Chicago, if I remember correctly. So in that whole area, and they don't know what to do in the sense of they've been looking to get at least one person hired, and they have so they're similar to like you, Ann and Lisa. They're not a company that hires, they're a company that calls the candidate and then sends them on, hopefully to find a job. They have not had one hire in a year. And you'll have to excuse me because that is a call I have to take. So I'm going to let somebody else jump on. All right. And
All right.
I don't have to take, this is not one I have to take. So hang on. All right. Back at the line here. Okay. So let me set that up. So why you think I have to take a call? Because I don't like you anymore. No, I'm having surgery tomorrow, and the surgery center has to call me and tell me, show up we'll just show up, but show up at a specific time.
So
Some days you just want to hurt it.
I can answer some of that question, Paula.
All right, Solomon, you go, and I'm going to try to find my mute button, there we go. All right.
So I don't like the autism hiring program, which turned into the neurodiverse hiring program. It's been around for a while, but I think so I think it's not necessarily that it's a flavor of the month. I think there's a little bit more, I want to say insidious, but that feels a little too heavy-handed. There are other issues that raises. One, and the reason we created it, let me back up. The reason we created the neurodiverse hiring program was because we recognized that traditional hiring, the interview process and all of that was really hostile to neurodivergent candidates. So that's why they created it. And it's a 3-day seminar sort of deal where they talk about interviewing techniques and they go through a non-standard, which honestly is probably how we should hire everyone, in my opinion, but I'm not in charge of HR. So the issue I think that runs into it is, we don't have a disability hiring program for any other disability. And two, what I think is maybe the worst of the two is that it is very specifically focused on developers or programmers. So if you are a neurodivergent person who likes to code, then we got a job for you. But if you are neurodivergent and want to do anything else, no go. There's no special hiring program for you. There's no specific roles. Like, I think that's, to me, one of the big failings of that is it is targeted at such a very specific stereotype of autism that I think it does a disservice to the community at large. But I can be critical because I'm not part of that team. So this is my perspective from halfway outside. But that is one of the challenges we've heard from people coming through the lab wanting to get more employment opportunities. My ex-girlfriend, actually neurodivergent, tried to apply, not a programmer, and there was nothing for her. They had no, and it was a very disappointing experience, even reaching out directly to the people in charge of the program who I know personally. They were very dismissive of it. And I went, that's not really an inclusive hiring program if we're only hiring autistic programmers. So that is something I think we are still trying to figure out. I hope they're trying to figure it out. Is how do we really make that a truly inclusive hiring experience for all disabilities? But I would even argue that's just what our hiring program should be all up. But yeah, so it's to your point, Paul, I don't think it's necessarily for us that there's a particular shift in which disability, but I think it's how we view people with that particular disability and what we think they will be good at.
Right. And so it's somewhat akin.
Yeah. Like there's a
connection. We're hiring this group of disabilities, but you can only do X. And there's nothing wrong saying we need accountants, so we're going to go out and find people that have an accounting degree.
Yeah.
But you're still opening up to, do you have an accounting degree? Then let's talk about it. So Maria wanted to know, and I can almost answer this question for Solomon, because I am brilliant. No. She wanted to know, do you provide reasonable accommodations? And I know Microsoft does. One, because much of what you build is an accommodation. But I also know that Microsoft does. And
I mean, in the hiring process.
oh,
Yes, we do. There are reasonable accommodations for the hiring process all up that you can request. I think what I dislike about that, and some of the criticism we've heard from people, is a lot of people are really reluctant to identify as having a disability. Yeah, exactly. Like the burden is still on the applicant.
Yeah.
And especially where you have intersectional demographics,
Yeah.
like choosing which identity to mask or how many of them you want to reveal. We had a number of visits, but specifically I'm thinking of we had a group of Black women business leaders that came through, and that was their thing. They're like, I already struggle with being a woman and being Black, and to also struggle with being a person with a disability. They're like, that's too many barriers potentially I have to work through. They said, so I have to choose which identity, which battle do I want to fight over which identity? And disability is the one that they usually said they just don't bring up. So I think, while yes, we do offer it, it still requires you as an applicant, one, to be comfortable disclosing those things, and two, to actually know what you need.
Yeah.
As an accommodation, which I think is a problem with the accommodations process sort of all up, is the assumption that you, person with disability, know exactly what you need for an effective accommodation, which if
Yeah.
you've never asked for one before, you have no idea. You don't even know what the options are.
Especially not if you've never had that particular job. You don't know
Right.
the environment or the specifics of the work. You might not know until 3-6 months into the job.
Exactly. Like there's this assumption of perfect knowledge that I think is deeply flawed.
And that's a really good segue into the next sort of block in the meeting. One of the things, and it does segue into what Chris is going to begin to kind of scope out, is yes, you can train your recruitment team, your HR team, your hiring managers, whatever you refer to them in your company. This is what you do with somebody who's deaf. This is what you do with somebody neurodivergent. And then what happens is they teach them an X byline kind of idea. This is what you do. And then so everybody who is deaf gets that exact same something, or every neurodivergent or whatever it may be. And what it really should be taught as, this is your basic guideline. But there's many levels or layers that could be different, even if somebody says they're fill in the blank kind of disability label that they feel like having that day. But leading to that segue is, you're right, Solomon, all too often it's either it's a combination, I think, and then I'm gonna let Chris take it over. It's a combination of a hiring official either being given, you do X, or floundering sort of idea, and then behoovent on the candidate either to disclose or pick which one you want to disclose. So I'd love to hear from other people. Take it away, Chris.
I think a lot of times, unfortunately, it just becomes the individual or the organization there's a risk aversion. So you try to just speak by the book, and it becomes a very rote conversation, if it even is a conversation about disability and accommodations, or there's just a lack of comfort with the conversation on the individual's part. So usually, oftentimes, if it even comes up, it is can you meet the expectations of the role with or without accommodation? And the entire, what should be a conversation is about a sentence. And it's very perfunctory, and that applicant, in some cases, to Solomon's point, they may not know. It may feel so mechanical that it doesn't feel like this individual's looking to engage in a conversation. So you just say yes, and then worry about whether you can or not later. You may not fully understand the role, but there really isn't an environment that would make you want to ask questions. So I am curious, the beginning of this conversation was really around targeting potential opportunities for individuals with disabilities, or looking for that applicant pool. But my guess is you're going to have people apply for these roles or looking for employment that may not identify, or you may not even know they have disabilities? And are you creating a process, a culture that welcomes them, so you don't have to worry about finding them? They're just going to feel comfortable in that process as they engage with this potential employer, knowing what to ask, or if they don't, knowing it's okay to ask or not be sure, that type of thing. And so I'm just curious if we do have anybody on the call, like, does anybody beyond the, can you meet these expectations with or without accommodation, does anybody have any tips, tricks, recommendations on how they're actually having that conversation about potential need for accommodation with applicants, whether it's early on or during the interview process, that seems to be successful?
We fail miserably, so no.
It's hard. I mean, to be fair.
It is. Well, it shouldn't be, right? 35 years almost since the ADA, we should have figured it out by now. That's my own personal POV. It's like, we figure out the things we want to figure out. This is just still there's still so much stigma, and also so many ableist preconceptions of what being disabled means, right? If you tell someone, if you ask someone, describe a disabled person, right? The immediate thought is a person in a wheelchair. It's not neurodiversity, it's not mental illness, it's not, digestive, issues. It's none of that, right? It's definitely none of the invisible disabilities, right? But something you said a minute ago, Solomon, is like that generalized knowledge is like the one thing, as someone who's going blind herself, right? I think constantly of the moment that I'm going to have to like begin using screen readers, right? And I'm like, I have no idea how to use a screen reader. I'm not an auditory person. Like, as I am today, I do not intake information very well just on an auditory basis. My kids tell me that I am neurospicy. I just haven't been diagnosed, right? And so it's like, navigating all of that, and I've made it through 51 years of my life without a diagnosis and without an accommodation. But like, to know that the minute that I say, yes, I do need an accommodation, like what that's going to trigger for some people is she can no longer do the work. Right. And so that to me is it's the bigger problem, and it's the harder one to solve, because accommodating people is easy. It's like, what do you need? Are you comfortable? Like, inviting people to your home, quote unquote, make them comfortable. That's all you're doing with an accommodation, right? And so it's just like, it's frustrating to me. We did it took us 18 months to put together a cheat sheet for recruiters on how to do pre-hire accommodations. 18 months. Because so many people were like so concerned about what you were saying. I'm like, y'all need to, like, obviously people are coming in. Obviously, if 30% almost of the population is disabled, you are obviously speaking to a disabled person at least, once or twice a day. So you got to get over this, oh, it's going to be a problem. No, you have a situation right now, you're just not dealing with it because it's easier to just cover your eyes and, pretend like it's not there. Sorry, I'm getting off my soapbox now.
I think this is what employers have to deal with, or if they're not dealing with it, they're just ultimately causing more headaches for themselves and losing out on available talent that's going elsewhere in the system.
Correct.
So, but yeah, I getting hiring managers, because the other thing is, if somebody brings something up in that moment, what are the chances that hiring manager actually knows what the right accommodation is, or if they even can be accommodated? How do you get them comfortable with just saying, it's a great question? Let me take this to my partners and let's see what the opportunities are, and really treat it as the conversation that it should be, rather than feeling like you have, as that person in the moment, like you have a responsibility and you should be able to just say, oh yeah, we can take care of that. Yeah, that's training, that's time, exposure, and just having to handle some of that stuff for a little bit. And I think we can help people get more comfortable with them.
So I was gonna comment on a couple of things that you said, Maria, I should say. First of all, very often somebody has more than one disability. And so it's not even just a matter of identifying, so which one do I want to pick for the interview kind of idea. Because what accommodates one entity or one type of your disability may not, you can be, believe it or not, deaf and neurodivergent. It's allowed. All right. And so, okay, I'm going to go to the neurodivergent career fair idea. And then I show up and I'm deaf and they're like, no, we're only doing, X today. That's an issue at hand, but also if you have an employee that did not identify as having a disability 5 years ago when you hired them, but because now they're progressing, and so now it becomes something where they need that accommodation. I think it is wise for a company to begin training hiring managers on how to address the employee who did not have one, or whose accommodation was working wonderfully, and now it seems to not be. So is it and then you have to, decide, is it the employee who just doesn't feel like working any longer? Well, hopefully not. But is it a good thing to introduce the next level or different type of accommodation before it is critically needed? So in your case, Maria, that down the line, you're going to need a screen reader. Screen readers are wonderful, but it's not as if you just pop it up and wowie, I've got this. It's not that easy, and you can see Solomon going, you bet it's not. All right. Or voice recognition or anything of that nature, you need to be trained on it. And you can't go out on a Friday and say, I don't need it, and show up on a Monday and say, and have your manager say, well, IT installed your whatever it may be, and you're going to instantly know how to use it. It is a good, solid idea for us to begin to work with then employees, right, and hiring managers, that when you see a significant change beginning to happen, before it becomes critical, that's the time to begin to address. Is it going to be different hardware? Is it going to be different software? What is really going to be needed? In the deaf community, there's something called Usher syndrome. And you are born deaf. But if you have Ushers, you are going to lose your sight. It's retinitis pigmentosa. And so you have peripheral, then you have less and less until you have tunnel vision. Well, it is not a good idea to wait until you have tunnel vision, because obviously a screen reader isn't going to do them any good if they are deaf, because it's going to be reading to you auditorily. How do you maintain that person's position? What needs to be addressed? And so again, I don't need it. I show up on Monday, I need it. I think that's another HR nightmare and accommodation nightmare. And when that happens, and I've seen it happen in that community and in others, well, we can't accommodate you anymore. You'll have to go out on FMLA, or you'll retire, or whatever it may be, because we can't do anything for you. how do we begin to parse out as those in the workforce development field, and then those that hire? What do we do with that person? You know, you hired them at 20 and now they're 30. Well, I don't think they're ready to go for retirement at 30.
Sorry, just the comment in the chat.
I'm reading some chat. I'm gonna.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, the one other thing I'd say, and again, for those who I haven't spent a lot of time with, most of my background's in HR for large organizations and in a lot of leadership roles. And you know, when you're going through the selection process, a lot of those interviews, beyond trying to answer the technical parts of the role, it's trying to connect with the individual on both sides of the table. And if you can really open up a conversation where somebody's sharing about their personal life with you, and that individual can feel out their potential boss, that's a conversation that unfortunately a lot of times never gets had anywhere during the interview process. And only much later do you find out that potentially there's not a fit there culturally or interpersonally. And so it adds a layer there by allowing that individual to talk about themselves and actually have a real conversation. So it's kind of an added perk. And then when I think about, again, the fact that individuals with disabilities are applying for these roles, but maybe for some of the reasons that got brought up, some of the intersectional challenges, they may shy away from sharing their full self. Giving that person that opportunity to talk about it and feel good about it is a confidence builder in a way that can very likely give them a better chance of landing that role with the organization. And so that in and of itself will probably help that employer out over the long term when it comes to improving chances of high quality candidates, because that individual really can bring their full selves into that interview process. Just a couple of thoughts. And again, I'd love for anybody to chime in if they have things that they do, but hopefully, and I think this is going to be different by organization, but our job description's accurate. You know, if we're saying we're asking the employee to lift 50 pounds, but then you go and talk to the employees doing the job, and they're like, I got to lift 100 pounds on a regular basis. Like, you got a mismatch there. And so there's probably an opportunity to review what that is so we can make sure that these potential applicants really understand the role, and that it can be properly compensated, et cetera, because it actually, all the parties that are involved in that know what the role actually is. Making sure we slow down enough in the interview to talk a little bit more about that. Oftentimes you get did you read the job description? Do you understand what it is? Can you do it? And not slow down and maybe call out some of those key things and then get into that potential conversation around any concerns at all. And even after that, like, do we slow down enough to just say, if you think of anything, if something comes up, like, want to make sure you can ask. So don't worry if nothing comes to mind today. It's just creating that environment where people feel comfortable, because it may be that there's something that is going to pop into their head a little bit later that just because of the pressure in the interview didn't come to mind immediately, and creates that avenue for them to know that they can actually go to someone in that interview or selection process to get some clarity around things. The couple other things I just call out, like hiring managers having some kind of connection to not necessarily disability specific, but I would say disability adjacent things going on within the organization. So like ERGs are much larger than just individuals with disabilities. But if you have a hiring manager that's a part of those, active, or is just aware of them, or they've been involved in mentorship or some type of mental health benefits, and they can speak at a personal level about those things to candidates and just in terms of benefits. Again, you can spend a long time in an interview just talking about this, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that. It's just that hiring manager or whomever is facilitating that interview talking a little bit about not just what the company offers, but maybe a personal connection to it. That can make a difference for a potential applicant. And again, knowing that they can go and learn more about, ask questions about those types of things, and know that there's internal support, both with their peers and from the organization culturally, to support those types of things that are going on. as someone who's going through the interview process themselves, I am currently looking for a new role, knowing that as a recent amputee, I don't know what I'll need, but that potentially after I get hired in a new environment, I'm be able to come back and say, let's have some additional conversation. I can be upfront with you now about what I know, but there's also going to be things that I don't know. And I just want to make sure that we can engage around that conversation, I think is a big one. And then the last thing I would just say, and if you want, I can share these notes, but we have these large organizations or bodies of individuals inside most of these organizations that have been through this and either know what works or what doesn't, and would probably love to vet hiring process for our organization or see parts of it or give feedback and be more participatory. And at the end of the day, leadership will make a decision on what makes the most sense for them, but engaging those folks who have kind of the inside scoop because they live and breathe this and can probably speak to some of the war stories, but as well as positive experience that they've had can be a critical part of it. So just leveraging the existing employee base for some of those things can be significant. So again, none of those I think are a salve for this, but if the extent of that conversation is just, can you do this or not, or do you need something? And then we just move on to the next interview question. I think any one of these things can just open up an avenue where there's a level of comfort, and that can change the dynamic for that individual and hopefully for the organization and for the hiring manager as well in the process.
Solomon, I know you just put in the chat and I'm aware of it because we've had previous conversations. Solomon's, if I'm going to say something that you wrote in, Solomon's manager happens to have CP. And so eating, drinks, having a disability every day of his life, right? Solomon is limb different, right? So he eats and drinks it every day of his life. And they are wonderful, and as well others in the fields. They're wonderful representatives. That's the positive uptick. The downtick is, well, Solomon knows everything about somebody with limb difference. That's great, Solomon. And your manager knows everything about somebody with CP and fill in whatever other blank you want to fill in. And so that's the trap that we have to be very careful when we're training hiring managers, that yes, you are by all account, a SME, most of it, not all of it, because other people, even if there's a similar disability, life, how it happened, life events, were you always accepted, or were you the employee that somebody that looked for a job and it took 100 interviews before somebody said, I think you can do this job, kind of idea.
Yeah,
I'm
maybe
gonna,
Chris
go
was
ahead.
talking about having a hiring manager with a disability or an ERG leader with a disability, and it really got me thinking about there's just conversations we can have that we can't have with other people.
Right.
About technology, about life struggles, about the experience as an employer and employee, that I think there's something really, to just reinforce what Chris was saying, there's something really important about having people with disabilities in leadership roles and the environment that creates for employees with disabilities. That there's just a different dynamic that I have with my manager than anyone else on our team does, because he and I share that. And we have some really frank conversations about stuff because of that. We can have very direct talk about work that wouldn't otherwise be possible because we do share certain experiences. And it's been really illuminating. So like Chris, 100%, man, like we got to have leaders with disabilities as part of that process, because you can have that conversation in a way you couldn't otherwise.
And even for those who don't, to get them some exposure to some of those ERGs, and just, I think for better or worse, I think the broadening of some of these ERGs well, I say for worse, but it's really just for better, to include neurodivergence, mental health type things. I think hopefully long term it helps bend the curve around removing some of the stigma, and you see just participation in these where people are just curious. And I think them, okay, cool. Like people got stuff going on. Like maybe there's a way we can do stuff different to help them be successful. And just having a leader who can speak to that and at least has an open mind and you can have a conversation with, I think is a step in the right direction. But then to your point, representation in that space, or at least having a peer set or access to folks, it changes the nature of what you feel like your options are at work. If something pops in your head, can I go to my leader? Is there somebody who's got something going on I can at least ask about, or a group? Or it's not just, oh, I need to go to HR, and hopefully it becomes a very technical legal discussion about what's going on type of a thing.
That leads us, because we have about 7-ish minutes before the end of the call. And that leads us well into the very last little section that we wanted to cover this month. First of all, it's because one of the reasons is individuals with disabilities are often not brought up past the journeyman level. So they're not groomed to be the manager, the whatever it may be. So that's kind of a hold. October is National Disability Employment Month, also known as NADEM. I'm going to give you the 30-second history of it. So in 1945 is when it was first established. It was known as the National Employ the Physically Handicapped, and it was 1 week. In 47, President Truman established a presidential committee. That was nice of him. In 49, Congress actually passed an appropriations to give the money for the committee to have functional money. 55, President Eisenhower signed EO, which is Executive Order 10640, making it a permanent committee. In 62, President Kennedy signed EO 10994, and it became the Committee on Employment of the Handicapped. In 70, Public Law 91442 dropped the word physical, so it was more of an inclusive of all disabilities. 70, Congress passed PL 100-630, and they expanded it from 1 week to 1 month. And in 02, Clinton renamed it President Disability Employment Board. And here's my note on all of names. Notice it does not say, it says that someone else has to employ. Someone else was creating the committees. Someone else. And so never in that litany of the history is there the slogan that is used by many, nothing about us without us. So if you're still on the line, that's great. If you can briefly say what your organization might be doing for NADEM. It is 1 October through 31 October. And we all know that all of us here online that happen to have a disability, we will wake up on 1 November and like magic, we won't have it. I keep waiting for that magic to happen. But is your organization doing anything? And did you know where it came about? Maybe even run, did you know, what's your feeling about the slogan, nothing about us without us? How would you incorporate that into your conversations, asking for an accommodation or having to have your accommodation change because it's no longer the appropriate one? Nothing about us can also be in an ERG, but how to bring that into other ERGs. Believe it or not, you can be, a coder and not be neurodivergent. It's allowed. I understand. So just there are small things that you can still do that we'll make it at least you're acknowledging it. And then keep it on your calendar for next year that sometime in June, at least you should start saying, so what are we gonna do? And thanks you to the Microsoft that does, but do they do a lot for the Limb Difference Foundation? Because don't know. Completely, you're just.
No, they're not connected.
They're not connected, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know if it
I
was,
mean, I do both. Like October's
yeah.
Give Month for us. There's tons of disability stuff. We do a ton of events in the lab. We used to have a hackathon during that month, but it's been moved earlier. Jenny's team does a whole bunch of stuff. So like there's a lot that goes on in October. But no, the Limb Difference Foundation, which is the hat I prefer to wear in these to a certain extent. We're getting our language committee up and running. So
Yeah, and that is, so that's another thing. I am not limb difference. I'm limb loss. All right. Chris is limb loss. Solomon and Trinea are limb difference. And although we are lumped into one organization and we're lumped into one something, all right, our language is different. I came at it, my language is different to Chris's, and we're both limb loss because tomorrow I will celebrate 22 years. You're brand new. So it just comes out in a different language. And unfortunately, when someone doesn't know what to set or do, they just throw labels at you. And I mean, I wish I had a dime for every time somebody assumed I was a veteran. They come up to me that, thank you for your service. Great. I've actually been told I have to be a veteran because I'm an amputee, and therefore, it means I'm required to be a veteran. I don't make these, I don't make up their mindset, but it's just an assumed. And if I say I'm not, then it's like, oh, I might be contagious at that point because I didn't lose my limb in war. Well, but no kind of idea. So again, if your organization hasn't done anything, this would be a good time to consider doing something. If you need ideas, send Solomon send Trinea or myself or Chris an email. We'll come up with something clever. There is on the ODEP, the Office of Disability Employment Policy. They do have a whole cheat sheet, which I sent out last month, I believe it was, on ideas of what you can do. We can take up any other parts of the conversation at another meeting. We would love to hear what you want us to talk about. So send in some ideas, okay? Type it away, and give us an idea what you want to talk about, how you want to find the candidates. Where do you go other than your company has a great reputation anyway? And so now we will leave it with our great leader, Trinea.
Well, thank you, Solomon, Paula, Chris, Anne, and Lisa, for your expertise, and everyone else that was on the call this afternoon. Greatly appreciated. Just like Paula mentioned, if you have any topics that you're wanting to see in any of our meetings throughout the rest of the year, it's hard to believe we're in September already. It's years just flying by. But if you have any suggestions, definitely feel free to give either one of us an email. We will love to hear your thoughts. But again, it's always a pleasure. And I will make sure that the recording for this meeting is sent out by the end of this week for sure.
All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day and very little bit of balance of your work week.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Have a great rest of your week.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.